Hello there, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Randomly Views right here on Mason's Music Library. Now today I'm going to be discussing one of the most influential musicians alive, and that's Mr. Kanye West and his triumphant album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. This is an absolutely fantastic album, so without further ado, let's get straight into the review. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is a fifth studio album by the legendary Kanye West and is one of his most celebrated and beloved albums from his phenomenal discography. It was released in 2010 at a time of real instability for both Kanye West and his fanbase, as it came at a time where Kanye was being tested publicly for his infamous outburst at the VMA Awards, as well as countless other TV appearances where Kanye had spoken his mind and said exactly what he wanted to, leading to a ton of public scrutiny of his character, with parodies of his persona by TV shows like South Park. On top of all this public harassment, Kanye's previous album, 808 and Outbreaks, was a real polarising force for Ye listenership because of just how different and original it was, with the heavy use of auto-tuning, a very misunderstood technique at the time, as well as his pure emotional honesty on that project, which is personally the reason why I love that album so much. But all this being said, Kanye had something to prove not only to the listeners, not only to popular culture, but to himself. This album features some of the best development and production of any Kanye West album. Maybe not as many hits as Late Registration, and maybe not as many fan favourites as College Dropout, but this album featured a transcendent quality of self-awareness as Kanye approached this album by summarising the makeup of his own beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy, a paradoxical reflection on the complex and confusing nature of fame, exposing the listener to the darker side that came with fame, showing the side that most neglect to mention. Now this project is so important for any Ye fan because it shows how Kanye's desires and goals have led him to be surrounded by greed, debauchery and lust, but above all, a childlike creativity, purity and honesty. This album opens up with such a ridiculously good song. In fact, the first two tracks on this album are my most beloved songs that Kanye has ever produced, starting out with Dark Fantasy, a song that perfectly defines this album, firstly conceptually as it explores the rise to fame and prominence coming from his humble beginnings in Chicago all the way to waking up in Paris. But this song also helps to define this album's sound, as it features a real sonic shift from the composition of 808s and Heartbreaks, returning to a more bare-bones production style entrenched in the aesthetics of more traditional hip-hop, demonstrating Kanye's origins of his music and fitting perfectly with the subject matter of his song being about where it all began.
Penitentiary chances, the devil dances and eventually answers to the call of autumn. All them falling for the love of ballin'. Get caught with 30 rocks, the cop looked like Alec Baldwin. Inner century anthems based off inner city tantrums, based off the way we was branded. Face it, Jerome get more time than Brandon, and at the airport they check all through my bag and tell me that it's random.
And that's a track, ladies and gentlemen, gorgeous. Without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite Kanye West song ever. A song that is steeped not only in lavish and progressive production, but in some of the most incredible lyricism that clearly characterises a radical racial injustice in America, exploring the double standards in the American justice system, as well as the hypocrisy of a nation that celebrates the art that comes from the least celebrated social group, demonstrating one of the key themes of this album, which is juxtaposition, meaning the contrasting effect of two different concepts when put together. Take for example where Kanye says, "As long as I'm in a polo smiling they think they got me, but they would try to crack me if they ever saw a black me." Now this is a very deep bar that demonstrates how Kanye feels about his own blackness, that he feels he can't be truly himself in a society that wants to see anything but. For myself, I think the reason that I love this song so much comes from how inspiring I find it to be. I love Kanye's brutal honesty in this song, as well as his strength and conviction of his delivery, that is complemented in the most moving way by the song's hook, sang by the one and only Kid Cudi, whose words truly make me think about my own attachment to what I hold dear, and how easily time can strip me of this if I do not hold tight enough. And I think everyone will derive their own meaning from this part of the song, but that's just mine, and I would love to hear yours in the comment section below. The next song up is the super iconic track Power, an absolute epic that features some of hip-hop's most ambitious production and songwriting that explores the difficulties of success and the problems that come with power. One of the things that first caught my attention about this song was the sampling of the obscure hard rock song 21st Century Schizoid Man by the band The King Crimson. A really remarkable song by a really remarkable band that ties into this song in such a really interesting way, portraying the schizophrenic nature of fame and power as the song works to contrast the two main sides of power, namely love and lust, showing the addictive pursuit of both of these emotions and how each one countermands the other. This song just has such a lavish vibe and grandiose feel to it, coming from the layering of the samples and how the beat builds up. Take the introduction, for example, which I will play for you right now.
I'm living in that 21st century.
Amazing, right? I just love how those female vocal samples beckon the song in, helping to settle this whole Kanye West Godhead dichotomy, where he's represented as divine and all-powerful, all while showing his shortcomings and weaknesses, perfectly imperfect with all the glory of God and all the flaws of man, showing the listener maybe that the power of God lies within man, not all men, or nor a group of men, but in all men, in you the people! But I suppose that's just all open for interpretation. Okay, so before I begin closing up this video, I just wanted to touch upon a few more songs from this album briefly, because if I'm completely honest, when I think about this album, I think about these first 3 songs. I just love them. I just think they're so representative of the album and communicate the message perfectly. But there are some other really great songs from this project that I would like to talk with you about. The first of these songs I want to talk about is of course All of the Lights, featuring Rihanna and a pre-famed Nicki Minaj, a really well-paced track that looks at the focused public spotlight and the detrimental effect it can have on anyone subjected to it. It's just the weight of that constant scrutiny that weighs down on these artists. A really interesting song that reflects on the exposure to artists' public life and the saturation of their private life in popular media and culture. This song also just has such a fantastic production style, as well as an amazing performance from each artist respectively. Another really amazing song from this album, and the last track I'm going to talk about in this review, is Runaway, featuring Pusha T, a more subdued track that contrasts the more aggressive approach that he's taken on the majority of this album, particularly on songs like Monster. And I think this just adds such a sweet and innocent tone to this part of the album, showing the apathy that comes from chasing a life of excess and putting up with that shit for way too long. But, baby, don't worry, I got a plan. Let's run away as fast as you can. So that's going to have to do it for this week's episode of Rambling Reviews. I've been Carl Mason, and it's been my utmost pleasure to share my thoughts about this superb album. To me, Kanye West is probably the most influential active musician around, and I think he has been for a long time. I appreciate that's a very heavy statement to make. It's just how I feel. But what do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. But before you go, I have this week's recommended listening list for you. Just a few songs that nicely complement this project. Starting out with T-Shirt by the Migos, a song that's I've just been addicted to lately. Also, next up I've got Pursuit of Happiness by Kid Cudi. And last but by no means least, Welcome to Heartbreak by the one and only Kanye West. Once again, I would just like to say that I really appreciate your watching this video. It means a lot to me, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take it easy.